So we're going through a term of corporate downside.
Yeah, potentially in the future.
So what I'm saying is you're being fired. All right, so I want to go through a jargon. Oh wait, no, I have this jargon elimination strategy. I like 3-letter acronyms. Triple E elimination strategy. When you're going through your presentation, I suggest you expose this jargon, determine what is jargon, and then work to eliminate that jargon or explain in terms that are important to your conclusion. Exposing the jargon can be as simple as just looking at your presentation and saying, does my audience know what this term means? You could ask your roommate, say, hey, do you know what this word means? Once you've decided that, eliminate it if you can, and if you find it's important to your presentation, explain it. Explain it in terms that are important to the conclusion that you're making. Triple E jargon elimination strategy. Let me go through a quick jargon exercise. This is a sports example. Do you have any basketball fans in the room? All right, good. So we got a good chunk of basketball fans who will understand exactly what I'm talking about when I explain this example. Do we have people here who have never ever played basketball? All right, well, I'm sure we'll find some people that just, this jargon is way too much for them. And I'm sure we'll have some people who are right in the middle who understand a little bit, but see ultimately that we're talking about some very simple concepts and we don't need to use this jargon. So I'm going to read through this scenario of a basketball game that happened a year and a half ago. And I want you to think, what in this scenario consists of jargon or expert understanding, and how might I eliminate that and put it in terms of an important conclusion. So first I'm going to read through, and then I just want you to, then we're going to go through one point at a time, and we'll unmask this jargon. So, we're talking about a game, Miami Heat versus the Brooklyn Nets. This happened April 8th, 2014. Miami hosted Brooklyn in one of the last games of the regular season. Brooklyn had won all 3 previous regular season games. Miami initially used size advantage to attack the paint. Miami's LeBron James and Chris Bosh both got into foul trouble early in the 3rd quarter and relied more on perimeter shooting. Miami's James and Bosh combined were 0 of 7 in 3-point attempts. Miami's Bosh hit 2 of 3 from the line. With the inside threat removed, Brooklyn's Mason Plumlee guarded Miami's LeBron James aggressively and blocked the would have been game-winning shot with 2.1 seconds remaining in the game. Brooklyn's Plumlee shot 4 of 6 from the field with 8 boards. Brooklyn won 88-87. All right, so that's what happened. Let's go through and think about where we're using jargon, how we could remove that jargon to make this clearer to our audience. Let's start at the top. On April 8th, 2014, Miami hosted Brooklyn, one of the last games of the regular season. Any jargon there? Any expert understanding that we need to shed some light on? Regular season, okay. So how is that important? What do we need to explain about that?
I just don't understand.
Oh, just don't understand. Right, regular season is jargon in and of itself. So we want to explain what regular season is. Can someone explain that for us? Gary.
So in the NBA, you have 30 teams, and only 16 of them go to the playoffs. So in order to go into the playoffs, in your conference, you must finish at the top 8. So at the regular season, they play 82 games. So whoever finishes in your conference, is Eastern or Western Conference, top 8 makes it to the playoffs. And that's regular season.
Okay. All right, so very detailed explanation of the regular season. But, so the regular season is this pre-playoff play, and then after the regular season, we have the playoffs coming up. And are the playoffs more important than the regular season or less important?
Really important.
They're really important, all right? That's the part where everybody gets excited and start tuning in. We see who's number one. So the regular season is coming to an end, and the playoffs are approaching. Brooklyn had won all 3 previous regular season games. Anything going on there, jargon-wise?
Probably not after if you understand what the regular season is at that point.
Okay, so understand regular season. Anything else maybe going on? Maybe some momentum effects. Brooklyn had won 3 in a row. Might Miami be a little scared if they lose this 4th one, and then they're going into the most important part of the season? Want to make that argument for me? All right, so yeah, Miami has lost 3 in a row, and if they lose this 4th one on their home court, then how can they beat Brooklyn in the playoffs? I think that might be important to say. Now let's get to the actual game, as this happened. Miami initially used size advantage to attack the paint. Blake.
Not everyone might know what the paint is.
Okay, so we need to explain attack the paint. Arpit? Okay, yeah, we need to explain size advantage, we need to explain attack the paint. So let's do that. Does anyone have, I'm sure there's people in the audience who have no idea what that means, attack the paint, right? All right, so let's explain. Blake.
It's like the rectangle between the foul line and the baseline, and you're only allowed to do that space for 3 seconds, but it's the closest range to the basket, so it's the easiest 2 points to get.
Okay, so it's, I think the simple way to explain it's the closest range to the basket. It's the easiest way to...
It's the rectangle, that's the other color.
Yes.
It's much clearer if you see it.
Yeah. Yes, and sometimes it's actually not even painted. Right? It comes from the old, when every basketball court was painted, I guess, that particular way. Sometimes that part close to the basket is not painted. Now it just means the closest to the basket. Now what about this size advantage? How does that work? Christian?
The bigger you are, easier it is to score.
Yeah.
You can just shoot over or bully other people. It's easier.
So if you have big players, you can make those close range shots more effectively. Michael?
Or you can defend. If you're bigger, you can defend easier.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, yeah. So Miami, but are we talking about offense or defense here?
Offense.
Yeah. So Miami offensively had bigger players, so they could shoot those close range shots more easily, more effectively. Now, Miami's LeBron James and Chris Bosh both got into foul trouble early in the 3rd quarter and relied more on perimeter shooting. What's going on there? Ricky?
They had to shoot from outside the paint, like outside the, I don't know what the perimeter, what I call it, but
Okay.
3-point shot. They have to rely more on 3-point shots. So, but I don't know if that's still jargon.
Okay, so they had to rely on the longer range shots. But what happened first? What about this foul trouble?
They had too many fouls going. If you get too many fouls, you get thrown out of the game. So they couldn't penetrate his.
Yes, yes. So if you get too many fouls, you get thrown out of the game. So that's bad, right? And who is LeBron James and Chris Bosh to this team? What's that? Yeah, the two of the best players, 2 of the 3 best players, and they may get thrown out of the game. So that's a problem. What else does our audience need to know to understand this point? Great.
So what is a foul or how do you get foul?
Okay. Foul. I would say not so much. You could explain that briefly, but I think there's a critical point that needs to be explained to know how this affects the game. Dan.
How having more fouls will affect how they play.
Yes. How having more fouls affects how you play. So not only are your 2 best players in danger of being thrown out of the game, but how does that change the style of play? And how does it change the style of play, Mike?
Another point is that it's the 3rd quarter. So if you don't know how many quarters are in a game, 3rd quarter doesn't should be much too. Although quarter.
Yes. Okay. So okay. Okay.
So never mind.
But what does that information early in the 3rd quarter tell us about this point? Matthew? I mean, Michael?
There's still a lot of game left.
So is it a big deal to get in foul trouble this early? Yeah, this is a huge problem. We still have half the game left, and our two best players may get thrown out. That's important to know. Helena?
But if they have to make these perimeter shots that are further away, don't they account for more points? Like, isn't that, because they're scared to get fouled now, so they stay on the outside. But doesn't that give them opportunity to be more focused on?
Okay, yeah, so longer range shots are 3-point shots, but why is that not the way Miami wants to play? Kerry?
Well, because LeBron James is very well known for attacking the basket, and so it's Chris Bosh, he's like the power forward or the center for
Yeah, so they have players, Halima, that this is their thing. Attacking the basket and shooting those close range shots, that's what makes them great. We have the two best players on the team, possibly the two best players in the league, probably the best player in the world. And what else do they have? Size advantage. So that's why they want to shoot those close range shots. And so if they shoot the longer range shots, it's more difficult for them, Matt.
Yeah, and also the chance of hitting the basket and getting on this
Okay.
for the turnovers.
Yeah, yeah. So we want those high percentage shots instead of trying to shoot the long range shots where we get the rebound and we'll get a turnover. Does that make sense? All right, so where are we? So we now know foul trouble. Not only do we know what foul trouble means, but we know how it affects the game. It changed the game. We have to explain what foul trouble is and the effect it had. Boom. Miami's James and Bosh combined with 0 of 7 in 3-point attempts. What's going on there? Where's the jargon we need to explain to our audience? Alicia?
3-point attempts.
Yeah, all right. So what are 3-point attempts? Do you know?
Yeah, shots from behind the perimeter that account for 3 points, not just 2 points.
Yes. And these are long-range shots, as opposed to the short-range shots that these two players love to shoot. Question?
So that means that they didn't make any?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what she said, that they didn't, it was 0. You didn't
0
make each
out
try
of
7
7.
times and, okay.
Yeah. So they got into foul trouble. They had to change their strategy to the long-range shots, which we know as 3-point attempts. And were they successful or unsuccessful?
Unsuccessful.
Unsuccessful in doing that. Bosh hit 2 of 3 from the line. What's going on there? Is there jargon? Line, what's the line? The foul? Okay, how important do you think this is to our conclusion? The conclusion we might be working towards? Matthew? Not really important. I don't think it's really important. I could see an argument where it is important.
I think it is, they lost by 1 point.
Ah, okay, okay.
That third shot, they would have been in overtime.
At least one of those.
Why not anybody else?
Okay, good point. Yeah, the main reason I put this in, I have heard that before, and I think I'm actually going to have to take this out because 2 of 3. If they made one more, they would have tied. All right, so I just threw this in to say it's complicated. You have to stop and explain it, but it doesn't really support what we're going for in terms of the conclusion, which we're probably headed towards. Let's look at this point. With the inside threat removed, Brooklyn's Mason Plumlee guarded LeBron James aggressively and blocks his would-have-been game-winning shot with 2.1 seconds left in the game. Is there jargon or expert understanding we need to bring to life for our audience there? Christian.
Mason Plumlee is and why he's able to be so successful.
Yeah, who Mason Plumlee is. So who is Mason Plumlee? Anyone know?
Center for the Brooklyn Nets.
Center for the Brooklyn
Well,
Nets?
he's not with the Nets anymore.
Okay, all right. So this is last year. Anything about him we need to understand?
He's big.
He's really tall.
7'0".
Okay, is he a new player, an old player?
He's young.
He's yeah, he's a new player. Some rookie from Duke who blocks the shot of who? The best player in the world. Okay, so some rookie from Duke blocks the shot, the game-winning shot of the best player in the world. Remember we mentioned there might be some momentum going on here if Brooklyn wins all 4 games? And I talk about on LeBron's home court, Mason Plumlee blocks the would-have-been game-winning shot. Possibly some exciting momentum there. This is unimportant, and what is important is that Brooklyn won 88-87. So let me frame this without that use of jargon, and we'll use it with the terms that we just clarified, and see how it goes that way. We might start off with our conclusion, and say that Brooklyn won by limiting and overcoming Miami's offense, and thus increased their momentum. What's important for you to understand how that happened is, first, Miami successfully used size advantage to score close-range shots. They had the height, they shot from close range, and they were successful. But then foul trouble happened. It's important I explain what foul trouble is, and it's important I explain how that affected the game. Because Miami had to change to a strategy of long-range shots because of foul trouble, and they were unsuccessful. One other thing I want you to understand before you can understand the conclusion is that Brooklyn held the series momentum as the playoffs, which are the most important part of the season, drew near. Well, Brooklyn won by limiting and then overcoming Miami's offense and thus increased momentum. So you see how we took something that initially seemed very complicated, and ultimately we made it very simple.
And you did it like in 2 minutes. Just like it just flowed real quick.
Yeah.
Like it just flowed.
Just 1 minute, yes. Okay, so it was well presented on top of it. Thank you. Yes?
I remember I read a while ago, I read an article where it said that if you're making a presentation, you should use smart words and complicated things, assuming that everyone in the audience is smart and knows your concept, your topic, your presentation. And then I'm thinking, if you're presenting to higher management, can you assume that they do know all these things and make something so you don't make them feel that they don't know what you're talking about, that they're stupid? Like, would it be a...
So you definitely want them to understand. And I think they'll forgive you if you explain things in simple terms, especially if you have something insightful to say about how those simple terms relate to what's important to them. If you need to use complicated terms because you feel like they're not going to be, I'm just not going to be able to hold their focus unless I use complicated terms, you might make sure that they understand it. You might also use the technique I mentioned in the first class called assuming agreement. I know that you know this, but I just want to clarify that this is what's happening. I don't want you to think I'm talking down to you. I don't want you to think I don't think you know this. But just so we're on the same page, this is what's happening in the market and how this relates to our business strategy here. And I think as Jim mentioned earlier, someone who is using a lot of complicated terms may appear less confident, especially to higher management who understand those complicated terms. And they may say, gosh, why is this woman using this crazy term when all she's really saying is this, and that's really not a great point? Those are some ideas. All right, let's move on to content enhancements. These are things we can throw in at any point, but I wanted to throw it in now because you're getting ready for a technical presentation that you'll do next week. You could throw in these ways to spruce up your presentation, whether it's technical or not. Let's think about some ways to make your beginning, your middle, your end a little bit more exciting. The beginning, again, we talked about this as a memorable opportunity to grab attention. So some ways you can spruce up your presentation, some ways you can start off your presentation. A couple of ideas for you. Startling statement. You may stand up and say, did you know that rats in New York City outnumber people 4-1? Did you know that? All right, well, let me talk to you about my new building design program or cleanliness program that's going to help us address this problem or that problem. Narration, a quick story. You give us a little anecdote, which is going to provide the context for us. A famous quotation. Teddy Roosevelt said, that people don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So we need to show the voters that we care. And that's what this presentation is about. Question. Do you have enough saved for your retirement? Or are you going to have to live out your final years in poverty? Question for you to think about. All right, if you don't have a good answer to that, you better listen to my presentation very carefully. So, when we're in the middle of our presentation, we explore and support the conclusion, a couple of tactics. We're of course going to want to throw out facts. We don't have to just list facts to our audience the whole time. They want to hear our opinion. Fine, tell us your opinion. It's great. That's why you're making the presentation. That's why we're listening to you, because you have valuable insight that we want. And use some humor, some jokes. Keep your audience engaged. Tell them a story. Story in the middle of your presentation is an effective way to keep your audience focused. Examples. Can anyone, actually, let me get some ideas. Anyone have any other ideas of how they might spruce up the middle of their presentation? I think those are a lot. Okay. Coming to the end. Again, this is a memorable opportunity to reinforce our important points. We, of course, want to signal the ending. A lot of times, I've seen presentations that just end. You like get to the end all of a sudden, and your audience is like, oh, I didn't know you were coming to the end. If I'd known you were coming to the end, I would have listened to that last minute. So signal the ending. You might want to restate the main point, refer back to the opening. So I asked you at the beginning if you have enough money saved for your retirement. Now you have a better way of answering that question. So let's think about using the investment techniques that I mentioned, in particular signing up to be a client of mine. Vivid, positive picture. Get your audience excited about the conclusion that you've just presented. This is a great campaign to rid our city of rats. Explain next steps. So you've got your audience where you want them. You've just spent 10 minutes explaining why your company is great, why your proposal is effective, and you've got their attention because they know you're at the end of your presentation. Take advantage of that to explain what you want them to do next. Come set an appointment with me, and we'll talk about going further. Vote for me. Support this plan. These are the next steps that are important to me. Any questions? Any other ideas? All right. So let's go over your presentation, which is due next week. You'll come in and you'll make a technical presentation. You'll think about something that's important to you, something that you want to present to us. The subject is wide open, just like it was for your first oral presentation. We can brainstorm some ideas. In fact, let's do it. Let's brainstorm some ideas right now. Okay. What sort of things might you do for your technical presentation next week? I mentioned that I used to have students do a resume PowerPoint presentation. Just present your resume as a PowerPoint. Explain some of your past jobs, explain some of your job skills, explain why you would be perfect for a certain role. That's something you can do. It might be good practice in thinking about how you would sell yourself. Matthew?
A little along the lines of what you did about like game strategy. Like say like your team's playing on Sunday in football.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
you want to say the team strategy.
Yes. So let me explain to you the strategy that the Brooklyn Nets, the strategy that the New York Giants should use to win this season. They should concentrate on the ground game. They should concentrate on this and that. What else? Jim?
Why McDonald's should serve breakfast all day?
Sure. Yeah. Great presentation. You might grab some data with that. You might say the average American eats breakfast, twice a day, or here's the time dispersion of when Americans eat breakfast. Some people eat breakfast at 7 a.m., but then a whole chunk eat breakfast at this time. So that might be a graph that you use to explain why McDonald's should serve breakfast all day. Great. Other ideas? Arpit?
Can you continue on with the same topic that you did for the oral presentation?
Sure. Yeah. So I talked to you a little bit about, what did you talk about last time?
Marketing.
Marketing.
Pharmaceutical marketing.
Okay, so pharmaceutical marketing, now I'm going to tell you a little bit with some graphs. I'm going to reinforce those points with some technical things to back me up. This is not a group presentation. This is an individual presentation. You'll think about your topic, and as you noticed, all the suggestions that you all just made, I said were great suggestions. So whatever you come up with between now and then, I'm sure will be a great suggestion as well. Come up with about 10 to 15 slides. Presentation should be about 6 to 8 minutes. Could be less if you want. 5 minutes is fine. Try not to go over 8 minutes. Use at least one graph you construct yourself using quantitative data. And we'll talk about some other things that I mentioned earlier on in class today that I want you to include in this presentation. Choose a template. Just don't choose a white background. Customize that template. Put some sort of header footer that reinforces your presentation. Concise, uncluttered, powerful headings. We don't want paragraphs on your slide unless you have a really good reason. Think about those concise bullet points. Put a picture in your graph. Find some sort of picture that reinforces your point. Just a chance to give you some experience with how you might size a picture, how you might throw it into PowerPoint in a way that is visually appealing and serves your purpose. Use a graph that you customize from data. Sometimes folks will put a picture of a graph. I don't want you to do that. I want you to use an actual graph that references specific data. Give you a chance to practice using a graph in your presentation. Does everyone understand what I mean by that? So you'll have numbers, and then you'll have the option in PowerPoint to put that into a pie graph, a bar graph, and it'll look different. Play around with that. Use some entrance effects. Practice working with that. Practice putting that in PowerPoint. Use transitions using the triple L strategy. Come up with a powerful opening. I suggested some techniques to grab the attention of your audience. Powerful closing. Have some good content. And think about the overall organizational pattern. Do you want the conclusion first? Do you want to focus on the process? Do something that makes sense from that perspective. Now this can be based on a presentation that you've already done or a PowerPoint that you've already done. I will just ask you to construct this project from scratch. So please do not copy a presentation you've already done and just use that one. Make it from scratch. And this is a good chance, maybe some of you use PowerPoint all the time. Maybe if you don't, it's a good chance to just practice some of these techniques. Question, Ricky? And be informative. You should have a point, though. The point is, I want you to understand this. Any other questions? Jim?
For the data we're using, how should we cite it at the end of the presentation, or?
You can just put it in your slides. That's fine. You don't need to actually say it. But if you're using data from a source, you should put it on your graph. Great.
Are we following the conclusion?
Yes, but it's not going to be as obvious as that. But when you're giving your presentation, we're going to want an important conclusion, and we're going to want that to be supported by evidence, i.e. premises. And if you're not using that framework, we might scratch our heads and say, why is she explaining this graph to us when she's really trying to show us that it's important McDonald's serves breakfast every day? So I would use that to the extent that it's going to make it clearer for your audience. Jay?
For the 10 to 15 slides in 6 to 8 minutes, if we desire to use less slides, is that, or do we have to hit that 10 to 15 minutes?
You want to use a few less slides, that's fine with them. Any other questions? Good, all right. I look forward to hearing your technical presentations next week. Like I said, we won't get through everyone next week, but I will provide class time at later classes or provide different options. And of course, just watching your colleagues make their presentations should be valuable to you. You want to think about using these techniques and watching someone present is good practice for you. Think about how you could cultivate your own communication skill. All right, so we're going to spend the rest of class time doing a technical data exercise. Okay, so now I asked you to group yourselves in groups last time, and if you weren't here last time, I can put you in a group, that's fine. And a lot of times when I've done this exercise, I've just done it on the spot. I've said just look at the data. So you don't have to have a conclusion that you spent all week thinking about, that's fine. I'll give you some time to do that now. This is just a quick exercise in looking at the data, thinking about, given this data, how would you present a valuable, insightful conclusion to your MBA candidates using graphs as necessary? This data is 1 month advertising spending on social media sites by industry. In this column, I've got August of 2008. In this column, I've got August of 2009. In these columns, I have the different industries, automotive, business, so on and so forth. I would like you to look at what jumps out at you in terms of an important conclusion with this exercise, and tell us what you think we should notice about this data. Now, I will tell you, before we start this, that the reason I've chosen this data is there are many traps. One of the traps is there are a lot of interesting things. And if you try to explain all of them, then your presentation loses its effectiveness. So think about what you want to focus on and how other things may support that. And how you can use the right graph to bring that to our attention. Does anyone have any questions? Rebecca?
Do you have to use all of the data, or can you focus on stuff?
Yeah, just tell us the important stuff. I didn't tell you to just list all the data back to me. I gave you all the data. You're the one who tells me what's important about it. Any other questions? Okay. Is anyone who was not here last week? Jyoti? Okay, so Blake, who's your team? Were you in a team of Amol and, were you in that team?
And Christian.
And who?
Christian.
Who?
Christian?
Oh, okay, so Christian, okay. So can Jyoti join your team? Okay, does anyone else not have a team?
My team's not here.
Fine. Okay, so who's on Daniel's team?
Oh, yeah, Cindy to back.
Okay, and there's at least, everyone has at least one laptop? And does everyone have the data? It's on Blackboard. I could give it to you on a thumb drive if you need it.
That data.
Yeah, it's this data. You can just type it in if you need it, but the Excel graph is on Blackboard. You can pull it up so you don't have to type it in. All right, so let's take 20 minutes if we need to, and then I will collect everyone's graphs on a thumb drive at, what's 20 minutes from now? 7:55, and then we will present our 5 or 6 groups. And grab me if you need me for further explanation.
Alright, we should just let's cut the data.
Like similar.
That's what I was thinking, similar industries. You sure you just watch?
I'm trying to look at the numbers, how you
Well, travel, is it airline? Okay,
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I just wanna let you know.
Okay.
Horrible.
I was having a hard time finding like a common.
Yeah, there's no real cost. You want to just do like a top 3 to spend? Top 3 industries or the highest paying? How much would you say, Jeff? Oh, there you go. Jeff Food's got a point there. Everyone is increasing.
Yeah, that would be.
Yeah, right here.
Yeah. Or you could make 2 charts maybe and have all the ones that are increasing in one and all the ones that are decreasing in another, and then you won't have so many across.
Oh, that's true, but I think they're all increasing. They're all
Right?
Everyone
Sorry.
has.
I'm now looking at it.
She's, yeah, 2008 and the blue and 2004. Gator color. I'm sorry. Yeah, yeah. Oh, there you go. That's Is there finance?
Yeah. Oh, that might be interesting, just like the one,
Oh,
like
wait.
the variance between the two.
Oh, that's cool. What did you do? You compared how much money? Yeah, like, that's a very good one. I know, look at this guy. He's already built it. Let's I know. So, yeah, web media was high. Yeah. So wait, which were the top 3? It was web. Yeah. Web media, telecommunications, and what was the third? Entertainment. They increased most. Yeah. They were initially spent. Yeah. Yeah, the difference. Thank you. Yeah. I was like, what's that word? Okay, what's our point? Let's figure out that first. Like, what do we want? Well, web media, which is entertainment and telecommunications. So entertainment, entertainment, telecommunications. Yeah. It's all visual. It's all marketing based. But I mean, this is all marketing. Yeah, I know. It's in different industries. Oh, like one that spends more. Yeah.
I mean, period of growth.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
I think we should stick with who grew the most. Yeah, I think that's good. I like this one because my thing is oh yeah, yeah. Growth from social media. Like
Growth in advertising, 2008 and 2009.
yeah.
Growth, yeah, growth in social media. And maybe on the second line, below growth in 2000. Oh, yeah. That's fine. Yeah, either way, sorry, yeah. And then we need to put the x-axis or y-axis. So if you the actual, yeah, so we should probably put like industries at the bottom, like as an x-axis title. Sorry, I just kept saying industries. So an x-axis title and a y-axis title.
Yeah, like what this axis is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Just do that.
I know, I'm like, this is awesome.
The new version of it.
Yeah.
I was working off of like
No.
2003 or something ridiculous. Yeah.
So,
Amount of money spent.
$10,000.
Yeah, difference. So it's a difference. Rolled on. Yeah, that's good. It's spent. How much they spend? 1 month. This is 1 month. They have to make 1 month of advertising spend.
Oh, just put August.
Or yeah, you could be more specific. Or the data. Do you have a plot? Well, it's not 2008, it's 2000, but it should be like versus.
Yeah.